Well, good morning. Very excited to be having this next conversation. Earlier on, I had a small interview, a shorter interview with His Excellency, the Minister of Communications over here in Qatar, and we were talking about what Qatar is doing on AI applications. And here we're going to get the perspective of VCs, investors, and how they're eyeing up the opportunity. I thought it was interesting that last year, I'm going to bring you some statistics. Venture funding for AI startups rose to 73 billion. So that's up 150% from where we were in 2017. Still short of the peak that we got to in 2021, but it does tell you that the trajectory and the hype is there around AI investing. So Rick, I'm just going to start with you because I know you're focused on growth investing, and quite simply, how are you picking the opportunities in this market? What are you looking for?
So that's a good question. There was an interesting framing that a close friend of mine explained to me recently. I don't know if anyone here ever listens to Founders podcast, David Senra. So he had the fortune of having dinner with Charlie Munger probably 2 months before he passed away. And we were having breakfast right after, and he told me that Charlie summed up for him how he and Warren realized over many decades that the key to selecting opportunities is going for great, is what he said. So David asked him, like, what does that mean, going for great? He said, well, great people are rare and great businesses are rare, but when you find them, you end up having less problems. And when he looked back on his 100 years, he noticed that when he didn't go for great, there ended up being a lot of problems. And I thought about it, and the things that we've done well all fit that. And the things that we've done poorly were at times when we didn't go for great. And so I use that as a way to frame this overreaching effort of selecting opportunities. And it's easy to make mistakes and to think something is great when it's not. But when I made mistakes in the past, I didn't even consider at the time, or I completely ignored at the time, that I wasn't going for great. And so when I'm looking at the opportunity set today, there's a few ways that I think about benefiting from the massive, inescapable advancements in AI and not getting run over by it. I'll give you one example of a way not to get run over from it. It's a bit removed from AI, but experiences that nothing is going to come that's going to reduce the human desire to have amazing experiences. If anything, it's going to be even more important and more desired over time, not less. And so an example of an investment that we have that provides experiences is Amman Resorts. And so you couldn't get further from AI itself in something like that, but it benefits from an unending human trend. In AI specifically, we're trying to get involved with situations that will not be easily disrupted by rapid advancement, but instead are essential for leading the way. And an example is Cerebras, which is a chip company that makes the largest chip in the world, purposefully built for AI, and absolutely annihilates any benchmarks. And then in traditional industries, we're involved with a company that is rolling up traditional businesses that are people-intensive, that are highly sticky, but that are inefficiently run. And when you use AI to solve basic problems in those businesses, the cost structure comes way down. So those are a few examples of how we look at it.
Yeah, Jeff, let me put the question to you. You were involved in early stage investing, incubation. To what extent do you think that helps you in this environment of many startups coming to the fore with AI potential applications, potential use cases? Do you feel like you have an advantage because you're starting with them from very early on?
Well, I don't think there's a right or a wrong. These are, just, I think different expertise that you develop. I think what's particularly exciting for the WndrCo team is finding those great entrepreneurs with great ideas early enough to really be able to bring value to them. I know everybody talks about that. Starting a company 0 to 1, I like to think is impossible, and 1 to 10 is improbable. And so getting on the journey, with young entrepreneurs and companies that have already achieved that 0 to 1, and where we can really help accelerate the 1 to 10, which is, by the way, the longest path. It takes 10 years to create a great company. That does not happen overnight.
Yeah.
But we are seeing, particularly in these last 3 to 5 months, a very, very compelling new crop of really interesting ideas. They're very much, they are AI focused. They are AI for enterprise primarily. So, last year I think was a transitional year. Certainly when you look at the sort of larger, the big players that are trying to sort of, battle the platforms, if you will. That's not a game that we're in, and certainly watching, 5 companies put $100 billion bets down is an amazing thing to, to see and to watch and to, handicap. But it's an exciting time, and we're, as I say,
there's a lot of fear, consternation, enthusiasm, but lots of question marks about what the advent of artificial intelligence means. I'm going to ask you just to wear your media hat for a second and give us a view of, how you think AI ultimately is going to affect us on a day-to-day basis.
Well, I really think there's 2 very distinct lanes, and I'm not sure people have really distinguished at least the way I think about them. There are AI tools that are available today. I would call them first or second generation tools that are very clear productivity tools applicable to the existing ecosystem of storytelling, whether it is movies or television. And I think they are going to be disruptive into certain types of jobs. Will probably be eliminated, but it's also going to create a whole nother set of opportunities, I think. And so that's the unknown, and I think it is kind of scary if you're in the center of that today. On the sort of more optimistic side of it, and one that's more about trying to look over the horizon and see what's coming, to me, the application of what will be the 3rd or 4th generation of AI. So think about what these tools will look like 18 or 36 months from now, given how fast they are evolving. I'm pretty confident there is going to be a new form of content. And the way to think about that is that, we had movies and television were sort of traditional form of content. The next generation was YouTube, driven by, created by user-generated content, and that really is what fueled YouTube. And we then saw how user-generated content fueled the next generation, which was TikTok. And I'm pretty confident there is a next generation coming that is unique and different from the content that we have today, which is when that 3rd or 4th generation of generative AI gets into UGC, user-generated. And I just think it's going to be explosive, and I think we're going to see content that is different from what we see today, and there will be an ecosystem built around it, and it will be borderless and democratized and global. And here we go.
Exciting. Okay, Vinnie, your company is headquartered in Singapore, and I know you've been involved with e-commerce, fintech payments, but just set the scene for us on what's been happening within the AI space in Singapore as well.
So Singapore has been pouring a lot of money on the R&D side, but it's Golden Gate Ventures' view that Singapore is an international business hub, and while there's a lot of consumer AI coming out of Silicon Valley, and that is truly the magnet, just like Hollywood is the magnet for global talent, there's a greenfield opportunity right now for AI for businesses, so B2B, enterprise, and that international cities actually have a little bit more of a competitive footing there against Silicon Valley. So a place like Singapore, where you have 80% of the world's international businesses have a major presence there if they're doing anything in Asia, reaching these service companies and selling services to them is actually a little bit easier than from the US, which tends to be very domestic and very inward-facing. So Golden Gate Ventures' view is that if you're going to be investing in AI outside of Silicon Valley, outside of the US, the greenfield opportunity is really B2B. And over the past 2 years, we've led 6 investments in this space that typically will start in Singapore and go global from there.
Noor, you've deployed capital, well, you mainly deploy capital into emerging markets. How much of the focus is tech, and how much of within tech recently has it been AI focused?
It's a great question, and I think it's not just becoming AI, it's old companies in the portfolio, old 3 to 4 years old, that are adopting AI and becoming AI-led. So as you mentioned, at Global Ventures, we invest across the Middle East and Africa. We've made about 63 investments in the last 6 years. Of those, 40% are now considered AI-led or AI-first. And that's just in the last 18 months. I think, to Vinnie's point, in emerging markets, companies are younger, they're more nimble, they're able to adopt and get there faster than perhaps companies that have more legacy infrastructure. So an example is one of our companies that we did the Series A and Series B in a couple of years ago is called Al-Tibbi, which means the doctor in Arabic. And they've just built the first Arabic LLM in healthcare that they've integrated with the Abu Dhabi government. And obviously, this started as a company that was a WebMD in the region with as much Arabic healthcare content as one could find, a few million unique visitors a month. So really the first port of call for, I'm not feeling well in Arabic, where do I go? From there, they grew and became one of the largest telemedicine companies in the region, which is relatively obvious because they have the funnel of people that are not feeling well, and they could easily monetize that into telemedicine. And now they've realized how much an AI could do with that, and so they've built it over the last year, now integrating it, and that'll be the first port of call for people that are not feeling well. So companies like that across our portfolio have really said, okay, this exists, now what do we do with it? They already have product market fit, they already have clients, they already have a team, right? So they're able to get there that much faster than someone who's just starting out saying, how can I use AI to solve this problem? So they're able to integrate it quickly, and that's what we're seeing. Yeah. As a company, we invest across all tech. This is particularly interesting right now.
I just want to go back to what Rick said at the beginning, which is you want to choose the good companies. You want to choose the winners.
The great companies.
Well, the great companies, yes, the great companies. What is your process in the emerging markets?
So I think where we take a look at investing is that intersection of cutting-edge technology, so what is the world's best technology right now, to solve a problem that affects hundreds of millions of people. So you go to our website, it says we invest in mission-driven founders. Well, yes, they're mission-driven because this part of the world and our investment remit is 1.9 billion people, half are under the age of 30. And yet you take a look at what financial infrastructure existed. Very little. We were 85% unbanked 6 years ago. Now we're about 50% unbanked. Nobody built banks. So the question was, what technology can solve this problem? Healthcare is the same. We have 1 doctor per 1,000 people in MENA, 0.2 doctors per 1,000 people in Sub-Sahara. For context, Europe and the US have 4.5 per 1,000 people. No one's going to build hospitals to bridge that gap. We simply can't. We'll never have enough surgeons. So what tech can be used? And we invest in companies like Proximie, which does virtual surgeries. Now they've done 80,000 surgeries in the US, but built out of here, built out of Beirut originally, because of the problem of not enough surgeons getting to enough places as fast as you can. So taking that, what can technology provide, the best in the world technology, to solve problems that affect hundreds of millions of lives, massive TAM, real-world TAM, not incremental solutions, but exponential solutions, and we get behind those.
Yeah, so it's, you have a problem looking for a solution, not a solution to a solution looking for a problem.
Exactly.
Rick, you're involved in private equity, private credit rather, and public markets, so it's an interesting composition of the portfolio. How do you set about identifying opportunities in this specific market? Because you can go down any one of those channels.
Yeah, so the way we operate is those three units, private equity, private credit, and public markets, are completely separate. So we have separate teams, separate focus, and so they each do different things. In the private equity business, our main focus is on growth equity of the kind of stuff that we're talking about today. In private credit, we loan money mostly to traditional businesses on a senior basis. And public markets, the idea is to try to have an uncorrelated return stream. So all three are a bit separate, but our work in the space that we're discussing in AI and AI-related things is inside of our private equity unit in our growth fund.
And how closely are you looking at opportunities in this part of the world right now?
We're looking.
That's it.
No, I mean,
Having conversations.
In terms of the Middle East, yeah, so it's a region that has, depending on how you define it, something like 500 million people, and there's significant opportunity because there has not been a lot of dominance established yet, and so it leaves kind of a wide open field. And then if you go the other direction in like a 3 or 4 hour flight, you end up in India, where we have a significant amount of exposure and do a significant amount of work. And there's some major trends playing there, which is really part of this region. I mean, it's closer to India from here than to half of the Middle East in terms of just flight time. And there's massive opportunity in India that we see.
Jeffrey, earlier on when I was speaking to His Excellency, the Qatari Minister of Communications, you were talking about the rise of data centers around this part of the world, which is also part of the whole AI ecosystem. How do you view the opportunity in the sense that it's not just, we're not just talking about the applications of AI, but everything that goes along with it, the ecosystem that will go along with it, be it data centers, be it chips, be it human capital?
Not our lane. So I really, other than I think like everybody else, following what would seem to be great opportunities for data centers here in this part, but they've already have them. They've been building them. They have them here in Doha and Abu Dhabi, and building them in other parts of the region. Obviously, the energy supply that is here, is a competitive advantage. But just the fact that there are 500 million people here, so all the big players are either here or on their way. So Microsoft and Google and Meta, and they're all well invested and continuing and see this as a place of opportunity. We hear that from the leaders and CEOs of those companies.
I would say in the region too, there has emerged one company out of Abu Dhabi that has done amazing work in AI, and it's Group 42.
Yeah.
And they recently signed a deal with Microsoft, which was quite groundbreaking. Microsoft invested $1.5 billion in Group 42, and they're collaborating in the region and beyond. And I think it's the first large-scale demonstration of AI's success in the region as global best-in-class.
Yeah.
But they've been doing it for a very long time. It's a perfect example. They're not new to this. G42 has been, well over a decade of heavily invested around all aspects of AI, including infrastructure.
Yeah, and to echo the conversation that I had with His Excellency, the Minister, earlier, they had their AI vision put in place from 2019, so it's all around the region. You're seeing these types of initiatives pop up. Vinnie, I know that there has been a collaboration deal put together between Singapore and Saudi Arabia.
Yep.
How does that present opportunities to a firm like yours?
Yeah. So the Singapore GCC corridor has been historically pretty strong, has gotten stronger over the past few years. Singapore, Saudi Arabia, Singapore, Qatar. So for the past 18 months, we've actually been doing exploratory trips with CEOs of billion-dollar companies, unicorns from Asia, bringing them into the region for expansion here. And we've had quite a few companies that have expanded quota payments into Saudi Arabia, multiplier into the UAE. So there's actually a strengthening, growing corridor between these two regions. And again, what I would look at it is if you've started a company here, startup, or in a place like Singapore, Indonesia, going to US or Europe are very competitive, very difficult markets. But for a company from this region looking towards Southeast Asia or vice versa, there's actually a lower level of competition. And so that's a greater opportunity for a startup. And that corridor, I think, is actually very, very valuable, both for investors and startups.
Well, it has been a tough funding environment for many of these startup founders. Given your focus in the region, what do you tell them? What advice do you give to these founders?
So, I'll pick up from what Vinnie was talking about as well. In our part of the world, a lot of the founders do build regionally, and there are a lot that also build globally. We have about a dozen founders in the portfolio that have more revenues in the US or in Europe than they do in the region. And when we invested, they were only in the region. One of those includes a cybersecurity company based in Dubai that has more US revenue than regional revenue. So just to illustrate that the founders can compete globally, and similarly, they can raise money globally. So our founders have raised about $2.2 billion of subsequent funding since our investments, and we're a young firm. We've had about 5 exits. A lot of those founders have raised that through secondary for earlier investors. But also, I think what we can't forget is that the region's a bit different. So even as Series A investors, a quarter of our portfolio is EBITDA positive. And that's not because we select that, it's because the founders work that way to ensure capital efficiency, given how small the venture ecosystem is. So when we take a look at where they're going to get their next subsequent round of funding, to your question, it's really, part of it is regional. We've seen a lot of the international investors try to come into the region. Part of it's international, because many of these founders do scale globally. And then part of it is acquisitions or large families from the region. I think it has been a very tough fundraising environment the last year. Our founders have struggled, but they've struggled the same amount that they've always struggled being from the region. And people wondering, is there really innovation? Isn't there really innovation? Is it a local play? Can it become a global play? So I don't think it's any different. For us as a firm, we've managed to raise an entire fund in the last year. We started last March, a year and 2 months ago, and we've just covered our target. And this is one of the largest funds now. So again, it's been difficult, but I think people are seeing the opportunities in the region.
Yeah. Rick, I'm just going to give you the final word. Since we started off with your investing philosophy, what is one deal that got away?
That got away in terms of?
An opportunity that you wish you could have gone for and didn't at the time.
There was I remember we had this goes way back, but we had the term sheet to lead basically the seed or Series A round in Didi about 20 years ago. And we would have owned like 20% of the company for very little money. And we passed on it for extraneous reasons. And then of course that had a wild ride in the next 20 years. But I remember for a while that one kind of irked me. But I think the key to what all of us do is to try not to look back and live in the past with regret. It's one of the strongest human tendencies and emotions is to look back with regret. And it is somewhat counterproductive when you're focused on what you could have done, except of course to recognize the root of the error or the reason for the mistake. But there have been plenty of missed opportunities, and also opportunities that we did that we shouldn't have over the last decade. And so the idea is as Ryan Holiday titled his book, "The Obstacle is the Way."
Yeah. And you have to make sure the winners win big, ultimately.
Exactly. Lose small and win big.
Yeah, that's a good place to leave it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.